Today morning, as the governor mentioned, we had good news. Actually, it was better than what I anticipated. Because reading briefly, we've been saying performance under the program has been strong. All quantitative targets for in December 2023 were met, except the indicative target on social spending. Most structural benchmarks due by end April 2024 were either met or implemented with delay. So that is in sense the work we have been doing in the last 2 years when a lot of people didn't expect Sri Lanka to come out of this crisis in 2 years. I was confident, and I am lucky that I had a team that was confident. I must acknowledge the role played by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka in guiding this through, especially in very difficult circumstances, in implementing and upholding policies which required a curb on expenditure, unknown in Sri Lanka for a long time. I must also here mention my thanks to the members of the Secretary and the members of the Ministry of Finance, who along with the Central Bank were responsible for formulating the policies and more so of facing all the pressure on budgetary restrictions, which the Central Bank didn't have to face. And I must also thank the government and the Reserve Bank of India and the government and the Central Bank of Bangladesh. That 3.5 billion and that 200 million was a lifesaver. 2009, by that time we ended a war, and before that we've also had expansive schemes like the Mahavali development schemes, which required money printing. We were 116 rupees to a dollar. And the IMF said there's a moderate risk of external debt distress. So what happened after 2009? When the war was over and the Mahavali scheme had made us self-sufficient in rice, saving us foreign exchange. The free trade zones had ensured that our manufactured goods were going out, and we also had tourist industry. And that's the story, because in 2024, we were at 330. People expected it to go to 300 and to 400 rupees a dollar. Today, it's at 300 rupees. So that's the story. Forgetting about 1949 or 78 or 2009, up to 2000, what happened between 2009 and 2024. So I need not tell you what exactly. The growth of the economy was more a job for a printer than for a central bank. Or either we borrowed money or printed money. Fortunately, I was in a good position because my family had engaged in printing. And I thought there's an extent to which printing could go, and not beyond that. And the new Central Bank Act, which we have presented and which you are aware, you will discuss it. As I need to say, the two main aims is to ensure monetary stability, and the basis that we are now attacking the root cause of it. The central bank cannot grant credit to the government. There are no in which you can get loans. Neither can you print money, nor can you take it from the state bank. So let's start from the beginning. You are forced now to look at your revenue and how to raise your revenue. The second, of course, are the inflation targets. So we have 3 laws: the Central Bank Act, the Public Debt Management Bill, and the Public Finance Bill. Both will be passed by Parliament, which is the framework of our financial and monetary stability. So once we carry this through, certainly I can see Sri Lanka having stability after on monetary affairs and fiscal affairs for the next certainly decade or more. The second issue is corruption. Now, corruption has been an issue in Sri Lanka. Everyone talks of corruption and how to catch the crooks. No one tells us how to catch them. That's the problem. So my government had come to an agreement, discussed the matter with IMF. We also required their help, and we brought in the governance diagnostic report. Many laws have to be passed. One has been passed, the Anti-Corruption Act. The second one, Proceeds of Crime legislation, is now being drafted to be sent to Parliament. Series of other laws that are required, and by 2025 we will have the strongest anti-corruption system in South Asia, and even I think in Southeast Asia, exempting 1 or 2 countries. So this then brings us to the next part of the issue. Now we have stability. Now the next issue is the one that worries all politicians: jobs. How do you create jobs? There are a large number of people in our countries who expect jobs. And as the level of education goes up, certainly they are not being satisfied with just a menial job. They expect satisfactory jobs. In our country, virtually everyone has a hand phone or two at most. So then what is the expectation of a job? So we have to realize that our per capita income also has to increase as we find jobs in this area. This is also a growth area. But I was reading some of the reports, and I'd like to read from the World Bank, one of the World Bank reports on growth for 2024. Growth in South Asia is expected at 6% for 2024. It's one of the highest. But structural challenges hinder the ability to create jobs and respond to climate shocks. So what are we going? Are we going to get stuck at jobless growth, destabilizing the system, or are we looking at growth? So this is what I thought that we should address in Sri Lanka. We are all in this traditional British system where we don't address the major policy changes what are required. We pass various enactments creating one authority or abolishing it and creating another one, but the total framework is not created by law by us. If you go to many other countries, you find that there is certain laws on economic development, on regulating the financial systems. We haven't got that. We stick in with the British policy of don't do it, except for this, that Britain accepts free market economy. We are in countries in where it's all debated. Do you want a free market economy? Do you want a socialist economy? Do you want a Marxist economy? Do you want a controlled economy? Do you want a socialism with Chinese characteristics or with Vietnamese characteristics? We just can't make up our mind what we want and what our goals are. I thought then we should bring in the third part of the legislation. To me, that was the most important. How do we ensure economic growth? And what do we do? Because for Sri Lanka to attain growth, we have to do an economic transformation from our import-based economy to export-driven economy. As the IMF report also says in communique, nevertheless, the economy is still vulnerable and the path to debt sustainability remains knife-edge. Sustaining the reform momentum and efforts to restructure debt are critical to put the economy on a path towards lasting recovery and debt sustainability. The result is that decided that I will bring a new law called the Economic Transformation Law. We've had laws from the British system, from the British rule onwards, which created a colonial market economy dependent on plantations. Then from 72, there was the breakup of all the capital formation and very strictly controlled economy. From post-77, we started gradually liberalizing, but we did not bring the legislation that's necessary. A series of legislation brought in the 72 economy. But we were chipping away after that. And each time you chipped away, there was some demonstration outside or a campaign against it. Nevertheless, we chipped away. I said, forget about that. Let's put the new economy into place. We have fallen. We have failed. There are no need to be shy about what you are doing. Do it and be done with it. That's what Erhard did in Germany. That's what the Japanese did after the war. That's what the Chinese did and the Vietnamese did. So there's nothing to be frightened of it. And we went ahead. I have not in any way departed from the principles of the Democratic Socialist System that is there in our country. I have in fact incorporated two of the objectives to ensure that all citizens have an adequate standard of living, etc. for themselves, and second, create rapid development of the whole country by means of public and private economic activity towards the social objectives and public weal. So first I put down in the law, look, I am working within this constitution. No one can say that I am going outside the objectives of the constitution. But I mean, these two provisions are more than enough to rewrite the economic policy of Sri Lanka. But it has to be growth oriented. Others have failed. In clause 3, the section 3, I put down that the national policy on economic transformation must provide for the restructuring of the debt owed by the government, and the public debt to GDP ratio shall be below 95% by the year 2032. These are IMF targets. The central government annual gross financing needs to gross domestic production ratio shall be below 13% by year 2032. Now that's in the law. That's what we've agreed with the IMF. Central government's annual debt service in foreign currency to GDP shall be below 4.5% by 2027 and thereafter. So this is one part of the national policy economic transformation, which some of the factors we provided in the national economic transformation. Second part was transformation of Sri Lanka to a highly competitive, export-oriented digital economy. So this is a legal obligation, including one, diversification and deep structural changes of the national economy to boost competitiveness. So the law is saying you must have deep structural changes. I am wondering whether anyone can go to court and take a writ if you don't have deep structural changes. Achieving net zero by the year 2050. Increasing integration with global economy. Achieving stable macroeconomic balances and sustainable debt. Modernizing agriculture to boost farmer productivity, farmer incomes and agriculture exports, and promote inclusive economic growth and social progress. So that's the second part. Then the Cabinet of Ministers, in formulating the national policy on economic transformation, must ensure the following targets. The GDP growth to reach 5% annually by 2027 and above 5% thereafter. Unemployment to reach below 5% of the labor force from the year 2025. Female labor force participation to reach not less than 40% by the year 2030 and not less than 50% by the year 2040. The current account deficit of the balance of payments shall not exceed 1% of the GDP production annually. Export of goods and services as a percentage of GDP to reach not less than 25% of GDP by 2025, not less than 40% of GDP by 2030, and 60% of the GDP by 2040. Net foreign direct investment as a percentage of GDP to reach not less than 5% of the GDP by 2030, not less than 40% of net foreign direct investment after year 2030. The primary balance in government budget to reach 2.3% of GDP until the year 2032 and at least 2% of GDP from the year 2032. Government reach at least 15% of GDP beyond the year 2027. Multidimensional poverty headcount ratio to be less than 15% by 2027 and 10% by 2035. Difficult targets, but unless you make it difficult, you can't succeed. So let's see what happens if you can't. I mean, the government has policy, the government has report annually to Parliament, and certainly if there are any economic crisis somewhere which makes it difficult, they can report to Parliament and make the adjustments. But if a government feels that we can't do this, then they must go to Parliament and get the act amended. Otherwise, you must go within this. So this is opening out the system fully, and that's what we are aiming for. It also means that at the moment, like I've done earlier, we all work together. I meet with the governors, ST, my economic advisor and others weekly. But it means that we can now put together a mechanism. A legal mechanism has to come into place either by cabinet decision regulations or by law, whereby the central bank, the treasury, the economic advisors all can work together in achieving these objectives. So that is the framework we have made. Now, to begin with, I wanted to ensure that the beneficiaries, the initial beneficiaries of the measures we have taken with the IMF are the ordinary people of Sri Lanka. They are the ones who suffered most. They are the ones who lost their jobs. They are the ones who have to mortgage their properties. They are the ones who have to sell their land. So to ensure that, I've said that we should ensure the money goes to the bottom, to down. In addition to this, I think stabilizing the rupee and bringing the interest rates down has been one benefit. Secondly, with the help of the World Bank, we have increased the payment of social welfare payments threefold. And from 1.8 million families, it will go up to 2.4 million families. That's at the very, very bottom. To all those working in the government, we gave 10,000 rupee allowances. The private sector has followed. The government, because the plantation companies refused, had ordered them to make payment of 1,350 per day. This was challenged in courts, and the court has thrown out the challenge. So we've ensured that money goes in. We've also recreated our district development budget. These are decentralized money to build roads in the villages or to put up buildings. It means you're giving money for the small contractors and others in the area. That money has now been given by the government. A fair amount has been given to the people. And last of all, since 1935, the government has been giving out land for people to cultivate. Never ownership, only through a permit. Similarly, we have built houses for low-income families in and around the city of Colombo, which are given again in rent. We took a policy decision, we're implementing it now, that all lands given to the average people for building houses or for cultivation will now be given as freehold land. Then for those who have these low-income apartments, we'll give title deeds, which means 2 million additional families are going to get this money. It doesn't stop there. These are bankable objects. So look at how the banking service expands, how you take it down to the rural area. So in different ways, now we're looking at how we are also now bringing some new laws to change the vocational training, because large numbers go into vocational training more than university as they look for employment. So these are some of the measures we are taking to ensure that the people, the population, the lower end of the population certainly benefit by the measures we take. It cannot be confined to a few at the top. We want the big companies to expand, and I'm happy I see many of them expanding. Also, how we work together, we've already got hotels into Maldives, and we have investments into Bangladesh. That's good. Then we are seeing Indian investments coming into Sri Lanka. So in different ways, as we expand, I think we can deal with the economic issues relating to collaboration. But we are at a very, very significant moment. In many other countries, we have just won elections, new government has come in. In Sri Lanka, we are going in for elections. Expectations are there. Is it going to be the usual way that you go on and then you change the government in the next 5 years, or are we really going to deliver? And there the central banks have a major role to play. Thank you.